friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to talk about my two favorite beans that I like to grow. And today is actually July 29th. So you'll be seeing this about 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. And some of the gardening stuff I try to keep up to date, but since this is more about you preparing for next year, if you're interested in these, I wasn't so worried about getting it up right away. And what I'll be doing is I'll be showing you some pictures of the beans as they're growing in various times of the year. Not just what's going on right now, but like pictures from last year and previous years, so you can get a good idea how the plants look and the beans look. And then I'll be talking about what I do with them. So the runner beans are my very favorite beans, and that's the ones that I have right here. And I'll go ahead and show you also a close-up picture of these so you can see what they look like. They are, the beans themselves get pretty good in size, the bean, and if you like a bigger bean, these do make a really good chili. So I've been using them to make chili throughout the year. And I actually still have a full quart jar of the beans that I saved from last year. Obviously I saved some seeds, or some bean for seeds, and that's what's in this bag here, because I make these little baggies for holding seeds like beans and peas and that kind of thing. But I also had jarred up at least, I think it was 2.5 quarts, so 2 quarts and a pint of the dried beans, so at the end of the year. So that is one of the reasons why I like the runner beans, because they work really good as a green bean. As you can see here, if you pick them when they're about this size, that's the best. If they start getting to be about this size, they start getting a little bit tough. But since I'm going to be canning these this year, I'm not too worried about that. Normally what I do when I get to this point, and if I missed them and didn't pick it when it was young enough, then I'll just leave them and let them finish out. Now these beans will actually get 2 to 3 times this big, and that's when you let them stay on the plants and then save them for the beans themselves. And so they'll get about this long, some of them. So here's some pictures here from last year so you can see this, the size of these things. They get really big. One of the reasons I like them is they're good dual purpose bean. And also because for here in our area, these runner beans, they grow like crazy. They've been the best growing bean that I've tried. I've tried several different beans. Some never do anything. Bush beans are a waste of time, especially when we're working in a smaller area. I always go for anything that's going to climb. I've tried bush beans. The two problems I have there, the space they take up on the ground instead of going upwards, and the slugs are more likely to eat them down to nothing when you do that. So I've tried growing dragon tongue beans, really good beans, but I got so few on there because that was the slug's favorite ones, and they were a bush bean. Now I don't know if there's a pole bean variety of the dragon tongue, but if you live in an area where you don't have as many slugs, or you live in a place where all the famous natural slug remedies like beer, diatomaceous earth, and on and on and on actually work for you, unlike they do here, even copper, then I recommend trying those dragon tongue beans, because they are delicious and they're very interesting looking bean. However, for us in the Pacific Northwest, especially here in Rain Country, these ones do the best. The ones that do the second best for me are the purple potted pole bean. And this is the size you want to pick them if you want to use them as a green bean. But I have found, I just experimented with these last year, they also make a good dual purpose bean. So they will get much bigger, not near as big as the runner beans, but they will get much bigger than this, and you let them stay on there, and then they make a good shelling bean or dry bean. And I did try just saving up a little bit like this and then cooking them up. I think I did add them to chili. I did a mixed bean chili, and they were really good. So I've been growing the purple potted beans longer than I have the runner beans, because I just thought they were interesting, and they do very good. But I noticed that they grow later. They come on later than, I've only just started getting the purple beans. That's why you'll always see a lot more of the green beans than the purple beans. But they still do pretty good here. And it's such a beautiful plant. It's a very dark green, much darker than other bean plants that I've tried to grow or am growing. And so it adds more color to the garden that way. And then the flower itself is also purple, so it adds another color. So that's another reason why these two, actually there's 4 different types of beans here altogether, because in my runner beans I have 3 different varieties. I have what's called the Scarlet Runner, which a lot of people are most familiar with. It has the kind of a deep orange flower. And then I have the Sunset Runner, which has the peach colored flower. And then the third one is called the Barnside Sweet Runner, which is just like the Scarlet Runner, the color and everything like that, except for the beans get even bigger. So that's the only difference really between the Barnside Sweet and the regular Scarlet Runner. And I have all 3. I just put all the seeds together. And what I'll do is I'll take a picture, a close-up of the beans, so you can see the difference in the color. So I can tell the difference between the Sunset Runner and the Scarlet Runner by the color of the bean. That's the only difference there is. And then typically if you see a really big one, the bigger size one, the Barnside Sweet Runner. So typically, but sometimes those other ones can get pretty big too. So anyway, these beans are, not only do they grow prolifically, but having them out in their garden, climbing on everything, and having those beautiful flowers and the purple and the peach and the deep orange just adds so much vibrancy to the garden, so much color, and it's so beautiful. I love it so much. And so I highly recommend these 2. Now, I did try growing the rattlesnake beans that I've heard a lot of great things about, and kind of like I figured. I mean, just the name rattlesnake alone, I know it's called that because of the way the bean shakes around in the pod when it's dry. But to me, it makes me think of a place that's dry and hot, and dry and hot things don't like it here. And I've tried growing other things like black-eyed peas. I love black-eyed peas. Nope, they don't like it here. And so we have to find those kind of beans that do best for us. And so far, these 2 have been the best. I mean, the rattlesnake beans did nothing. They wouldn't even germinate here. One of the things I'm going to do differently next year, each year I kind of experiment, but one of my favorite things to do is to grow the beans in not just, I have a dedicated area just for beans, but I also, especially with the Scarlet Runners, like growing them in pots and in various other places, even on fruit trees, because not only does it give me more places to grow them, because I want lots and lots of beans, because there's so many uses for them as a green bean and a dry bean, but also because of the beautiful colors it adds to my deck and to the different sections of the garden, as you can see in some of these pictures right here. And so the mixing up the Sunset and the Scarlet Runners will be good for that. This was the first year I tried putting a purple potted bean in a pot, and it's growing okay, but it's kind of covered up by peas right now. And so one of the things I did differently this year was trying kind of mixing up the peas a little bit with the beans. And though initially it was great, the peas always die off before, just as the beans are coming in. And so then you got all these dead plants or these big huge plants that are kind of suffocating out the beans. So I went out, since I'm pretty much done with my pea harvest, there's still peas out there, but I'm going to save those for seeds. I've been pulling up some of the other superfluous plants so that my beans can really take off, because they were just shading them out just way too much. And so next year what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to only grow the peas in just a couple of real limited places, and then mix the Sunset Runner, the Scarlet Runner, and the purple potted pole beans all along the whole area, along my bean trellis, and then in my pots on the deck and out in the other various sections of the garden where I, even out in the squash patch, because, the squash climb on that. Well, the beans will always come up first and start to fill that in and add some color, even as the squash are growing. So you still have some more pretty color in there. Because, it is still nice to have things look really pretty as well as being productive. Okay, so now this year is going to be my first year actually canning my own green beans. And I've been holding off doing that because I kept waiting until I could get to a year where I knew that I had enough coming in all at once that I could pick them and can them. But it's still not really happening that way, and I hate running my canner unless I have a full load. So what I'm doing this year is I've already got some chopped up and just in a jar, just ready to go, not really ready to go, but I'll still have to add the water and some salt, but basically just keeping them chilled in the refrigerator. What I've got here should fill this one up to here. This is what I picked today, not a whole lot for today. And then probably in a couple of days, I should have enough to at least have 8-pint jars, which will fill up the bottom. So tomorrow, what I'm hoping actually that tomorrow I might have enough beans to can of the green beans. And then what I'm going to do is fill up all the spaces in the canner with some pint-sized jars of the dried beans, of the black beans. They won't be dried anymore. They'll at least be soaked, because you want to soak them first before, and that would apply to if you're saving your own beans like this and then you decide you want to can them. You want to soak them first, and then you put them in your jars. And depending on the bean, like the black bean, I could probably fill up to here with it just pre-soaked but not cooked, and then finish, and then add the rest with water. With some of the bigger beans, you're probably still best to go maybe about 2/3 of the way up, just to be safe, because you don't want to get it too full if you think there's still more room for that bean to expand while it's canning. Now, some people prefer to cook their bean thoroughly before they can it, which is, the nice thing about that is then you know just how much to put in there, and you don't have to worry about it, the beans filling up the jar too much and maybe even busting out of the jar. But this way you're not overcooking them either. Well, I don't think you can really have an overcooked bean, but overcooked in the fact that at least you're still preserving some of the nutrient value of your beans. So tonight I'm going to strain all this out, rinse it off real good, put it in my jars over here, top it off with water and some salt, and then I'll have them ready to go. And then hopefully the next day I'll put them in the fridge, and then hopefully by the next day I'll have enough green beans. Even if I don't have enough to fill up 8-pint jars, if I have at least 7, I'll be happy. And then if I need to do that again, I'm hoping to do another load with the green beans, and then I've got some pinto beans that have been in there for a while that I would like to jar up some of those too, because those are what we like to use when we do like a Tar Heel style beans and cornbread. We like to use the pinto beans for that. And then kidney beans, I do that with the kidney beans as well. So when I can up chili, I do the same thing with my dried kidney beans, so I can have plain kidney beans to go with when I make tamale pie. So but anyway, as far as growing, so far these are my 2 favorite, and I may decide to start growing some pinto beans. I just haven't yet, because I still have a lot in food storage, so I'm just not concerned about that. Same thing with the kidney beans. But I should probably next year put at least a couple of each one of those in the ground, just to see if they're even going to grow well for me, and then I'll know. But I do know that both of these beans right here do make a good chili and would work great in tamale pie and anything else like that. Oh, and the black beans. I have a feeling the black beans might grow fairly decently here, because they're a smaller bean, but we'll see. I should try those too. So anyway, what I'll be doing is I'm not going to do this on camera, but I'll be chopping the rest of these up and adding them to my jar, and then sticking these all back in the refrigerator, so that I will have them ready to go. Just need to add the salt and the water, and for canning. So if you're kind of new to canning, I don't like to do a lot of canning videos. It's not really my thing. I'll do a few, but I don't mind explaining to you. Everybody has their own method, as long as the method you use is going to be safe. When it comes to beans, they're easy to can. It's very simple. Some beans, depending on the ones you're growing, you may need to string them. So that could be labor intensive, and that's why I like these beans here. Neither one of these need to be strung, especially if you pick them young enough. They're very tender, and you just chop them up. Oh, and I was also going to say that this little thing right here, most people would cut that off because, well, it just looks funny. We're not used to, when we buy beans in the store, they always cut these little things off. I don't bother. It's edible. The only thing I make sure it doesn't have is the stem, and then just because that's hard and chewy and nobody really wants to eat that. But the other, that little piece at the end is just fine. You can eat it. So I don't bother removing it. I'm not canning my beans to enter in some kind of fair and win prizes. I'm canning them to put in food storage for us to eat through the year. But anyway, back to the canning of the beans. So I'll be doing pint-sized jars for my green beans. I'll be actually putting the green beans in the wide mouth pint-sized jars. Something like that I prefer to have in a wide mouth, but the black beans will be fine in a regular mouth jar. And for where we live, 10 pounds of pressure for 75 minutes for the pint-sized jars. If I was canning in a quart-sized jar, it would be 90 minutes. And and there's the whole process. For the All-American canner, it's you let it vent for 7 minutes. I think some other canners say 10 minutes, but the All-American always says is 7. So I always vent it for 7 minutes, put the weight on, and then keep adjusting the temperature. I do it outside on my propane cooker, and that way it's simple, it's out there, I don't have to worry about it, I just have to listen, and I'm always close so I can hear the rocking of the weight, and so I know if it needs to be turned down, turn up, or whatever. So look, if you get a canner, make sure you read all the instructions in the book. I highly recommend, if you don't have a canner yet, that you get the All-American canner. Yes, it's an expense, but it's another one of those things where with me, I don't find it important to spend an arm and a leg on a blender. I did spend an arm and a leg on a good canner because you don't have to replace the seal on it. There is no rubber gasket. There's none of that you have to worry about. It's built like a tank. It's going to last for the rest of your life and probably through a few generations at least. And I believe it's probably safer than a lot of the other canners. That's my personal opinion. It's the only canner I've ever used. Now I'll link below to the canner that I have, the size. It's the second to the biggest size. The biggest size is wider, and I didn't want one that wide because it wouldn't fit on, if I ever canned on my stove, which I never do, but I always can on the propane burner. But if I would have went with the very biggest size, it wouldn't have fit on that propane burner out there. So you got to consider that. But this will fit 14 quart jars when it's full, and up to at least 16, I think when you use the regular mouth jars, I could fit as much as 18 jars of the pint-sized jars in that same canner. So it's a double row, but with the pint-sized jars, you can, because they're not as wide as the quart jars, you can fit more of them into each row of your canner. And so that's why I like that canner, because I can, if I've got a lot to can, I can fit a lot in there, like when I'm doing potatoes or anything like that, and just run a whole bunch at once, because I like, whether it be using electricity, even if it was using the solar power, or using the propane burner, I really want to save my fuel and make the most of it. So I'm going to can as much as I can once I'm running that thing at a time. I highly recommend that canner if you don't have it yet. Now, some people have managed to find second ones at garage sales or even online that were secondhand for really good deals. So if you can't afford the brand new price that you find at Amazon, I recommend shopping around. Look at your local Facebook market. If you have Facebook, look in there. Just go to Facebook Market. It's going to pull up, the way it's set up now, it pulls up everything that's local, but you can also put in your town, and it's going to pull up anybody that's selling that type of thing, and you do a search that's close to your area, and you can even minimize the radius of how far out you're willing to travel to get the thing. And so look there. That's how we found the foosball table, and it was just like that. And so try that, and if not there, then look at Craigslist, look at eBay, and see what you can find. But I would think Facebook Market is probably going to be the place you're going to find the best deal, and you can actually see pictures. It's usually easier to interact with people and stuff on there. So just a good recommendation. And once I figured out how that works now, it seems like it's kind of newer the way they've got it set up. It's actually super easy to use and to find what you're looking for. Okay, and then one more thing I just remembered I wanted to mention is how I dry the beans. Well, some people, if you live in a dry enough climate, it would be best just to leave the beans on the plant, just leave them there and let them completely dry it like that, like you would with your corn. However, by the time the beans start getting to that point where they're getting close to being, you want them to fully dry, that's when our heavy rains start coming back. And I find they tend to get really moldy if I leave them out there on the trellises. And so I've started just bringing the whole plants in, or actually breaking off the clusters of the beans and bringing them into the greenhouse and hanging them in there so they could still get plenty of air and dry that way. That's the easiest way. Another thing you can do is what they call the leather breeches, and that is actually stringing them. You actually string them up. You put them, I've never tried this myself, but I've seen it done. But to me, the greenhouse method works really good, and it's a lot quicker. But anyway, you just do them this way, and you just keep crisscrossing them that way, and then you just actually run a needle and thread right through there and string them and then hang them up. And that will keep them separated enough that they won't mold. Now, I made a big mistake one year, 2-3 years ago, where I brought all the beans in at once. I had a big a couple of laundry baskets full of beans, and then laid them out on a table with a towel, thinking that would keep them, you know, and then tried to stir them every so often, thinking that they would dry good enough that way. But it was bad. A lot of them molded really bad. I was still able to salvage quite a bit of them, thankfully, but a lot of them ended up getting tossed because they just rotted. And so don't do that. Hang your beans to dry. Either leave them, you know, out on your trellis, or bring them in somewhere where you can hang them to dry, and try that leather breeches method. And I'm sure there's somebody out there that probably has a video that you can just type it in and look for that, and somebody can show you how. Okay, well, I think that's it on the beans. If you have any questions, because I probably have left something out like I always do, don't forget, by the way, that when I remember something later that I wanted to add in, I usually put it in text right in here. And that's one of the reasons why I like to stand like this, because I can put pictures and text right here so you can see the text. So some of you I know really just like to listen. I'm the same way. I don't have time to sit and watch people's videos. So you may miss some of the things, but don't be afraid to ask questions below, and when I get a chance, I'll get in there and answer them. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.